Hi, my name is Francis Hamit. I've been a professional writer for more than 50 years, and one of the things that makes it possible for me to be a professional writer is the fact that I have copyrights on my work. Now, these copyrights are very hard to enforce because of the current law, and I want to talk to you about a piece of legislation called H.R. 5757, or the Case Act of 2016, also known as the Small Claims Enforcement Act of 2016 Copyright Alternative. Now, I'm not a lawyer. This is not legal advice. This is business advice for writers and artists and other creative professionals who are trying to make a living. And to do that, you have to protect your work with a registered copyright. You have a copyright from inception, but you have to register the thing in order to be able to go to court. I've always been involved in copyright issues, and 10 years ago, in 2006, I had an essay in this issue of the Columbia Journalism Review about a copyright small claims court. Well, other people picked up on this idea, including the Authors Guild, and now there's been legislation proposed to actually implement one of these. This is a new kind of procedure for actually getting justice if your work has been infringed. You don't have to go to federal district court the way you do now. You don't have to have at least $75,000 in damages to file your case. You don't have to spend thousands of dollars on filing fees and service fees in addition to whatever you're paying your lawyer. And even if your lawyer is working on contingency, I can tell you from personal expenses, those fees add up real fast, and they're usually more than the case is worth, which is why nobody ever sues for copyright infringement. The Case Act makes it possible for you to go to a small claims board in Washington, D.C. We'll have 3 commissioners and at least 2 full-time attorneys to adjudicate these things. You won't actually have to appear in court if you don't want to. You'll be able to do it by mail and by telephone, and it'll be on the fax. Now, the other side of that is it's not going to be a big payday on any individual claim, but you will be able to make individual claims. In order to be able to access this law, you will have to do what you've always had to do: register your copyrights. And that means with the federal government and paying the fees and getting a certificate that you'll have in hand when you go to either federal district court or to the Copyright Claims Board when it's set up, because that's the first thing you have to have. It gives you standing in court. If you don't have that, you are defenseless before the law. They can take your copyright and do what they want with it. And the first question they will always ask if you complain is, did you register your copyright? And if you say no, they will ignore you. If you say yes, they may ignore you because they think that it's just too much time, trouble, and money for you to go to court and to get justice. And these days, in order to do that, you can't do it on a single complaint. It doesn't rise usually to the level that the federal court requires, which is about $75,000. You have to have multiple infringements by the same infringer, which is what I did when I went to court about 10 years ago. I got paid. It took me about 4 years to get there. It was an enormous amount of time and trouble. I did it basically to prove a point because I thought that I was owed money, and the court agreed with me. I can't tell you how much, that's sealed, but I did get paid for about 4 years of work. So I'm happy, but I'm not that happy. I would have rather avoided the whole thing by having a mechanism in place that would make people think twice about just taking other people's stuff and using it without permission, which is what the Case Act is about. Case Act of 2016 is your best chance of actually protecting your copyright because it changes the dynamic. The big companies will no longer be able to ignore your initial letter or your attorney's initial letter on the assumption that you're never going to be able to get to court because you won't be able to afford the fees. You'll be able to afford the fees, and suddenly they have a situation where a board in Washington, D.C. may tell them to pay up and give you whatever you've got coming, up to $30,000. Now, that doesn't mean the $30,000 is the absolute limit of what you can get. That's just what you can get per article. But I had almost 100 magazine articles. on one case. So do the math. 100 times $30,000 is $3 million. I would have had to file every case individually rather than as a group. But it wouldn't have cost me as much as filing the big case that I did have. But what you need to do in order to make this thing work is to let your Congress, your congressional representative, and your senators both know that the act is out there and that you would like to see it happen. Every letter they get, and I recommend doing it the old-fashioned way, with a letter through the United States Postal Service, rather than an email. Emails tend to get ignored and dumped. Is counted as the opinion of 100 people by people who receive them. This will be a big barrier to people just taking your stuff without permission and on the assumption that you'll never be able to sue, because now you'll be able to sue. It gives you a mechanism outside of the federal district court to actually go and get paid for somebody infringing your work. It's going to make people think twice about just grabbing your stuff, or your photograph, your work of art, your article, and republishing it without your permission. It gives you the right to control the property that is guaranteed to you by the Constitution and by the Copyright Act. It is for your benefit. You need to get behind this, and you need to support H.R. 5757. Look it up online. Write your congressman. Write your senator. Get your friends involved. Asking your congressional representative to co-sponsor it and to vote for it, and asking your senators to create a similar legislation in the Senate, so that when it goes to the Senate, that there's already something in place, and that they can send it to the president, and then the president can sign it, and then we will have this mechanism that will not only give us additional copyright protection, but will also keep people from ripping us off. Thank you.